You won't believe this, but the day I stepped back into the mountain house I legally bought, I found someone else already living inside, and not just anyone, but the worst kind of person you can imagine, an HOA Karen who thought she owned the whole mountain. Let me take you back to the beginning because the whole story is something out of a movie. I had been searching for a property away from the chaos of the city, somewhere quiet where I could breathe fresh air, work with my hands, and build something meaningful. I'd been scrolling listings for weeks, and one caught my attention immediately. It was an old abandoned mountain house, sitting on several acres of land, and the price was almost too good to be true. The photos showed cracked windows, weeds growing through the steps, and a roof that had seen better days, but I didn't see an eyesore. I saw potential. I could imagine the porch rebuilt, a fire crackling inside, the smell of pine trees drifting through open windows. The house was located miles away from the nearest town, tucked at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by tall forests and mountain ridges. To me, that isolation wasn't a downside, it was perfect. I wanted peace, and this place promised exactly that. When I went to visit the property, I half expected it to be worse than the photos. Instead, I was pleasantly surprised. Sure, the walls needed new siding, and the inside was dusty, but the foundation was solid. The view from the back deck was breathtaking, overlooking a valley that seemed to go on forever. I stood there for a while just imagining the life I could have in that house. Quiet mornings with coffee, weekends hiking the trails, nights watching the stars without city lights drowning them out. The real estate agent admitted that nobody had lived there for almost 10 years. The last owner passed away, and the county had taken possession after taxes went unpaid. That's why it was on the market so cheap. I didn't hesitate. I signed the paperwork, paid the price, and walked away with a deed in my hand and a key that felt like it opened not just a house, but a whole new chapter of my life. I was buzzing with excitement, but I wasn't ready to dive in yet. I wanted to renovate it properly, not just patch it up. So I went back to the city to line up contractors, order materials, and make a plan. I figured the house had sat empty for a decade, it could sit a few more weeks until I was ready. I left thinking the place was waiting just for me, untouched, and that I'd come back to start fresh. I had no idea that in my short absence, someone else would decide they had a claim to my mountain house. The day I returned, everything felt off the moment I drove up the gravel path. First, I noticed tire tracks in the dirt driveway. That made no sense, because I hadn't given anyone permission to come up here. Then, as I got closer, I saw something that made my stomach tighten: curtains in the windows. That may not sound strange, but when I left, there were no curtains, no furniture, nothing. The house had been stripped bare long ago. Now, not only were there curtains, but I thought I caught the faint glow of a lamp. I parked my truck and just sat there for a minute, wondering if my eyes were playing tricks on me. I stepped out, walked slowly up the path, and noticed flower pots on the porch that weren't there before. My heartbeat picked up. Someone had been here, someone was living here. I pulled out my key, slid it into the lock, and twisted. The door creaked open, and the moment I stepped inside, my world flipped upside down. Standing in the living room, arms crossed like she was guarding her castle, was a woman in her mid-50s. Her hair was short and tightly curled, her lips pursed into a permanent scowl, and she looked at me with the kind of contempt usually reserved for criminals. "Excuse me," she snapped before I could even speak, "you can't just barge in here. This is a private HOA residence." For a second, I thought maybe she was joking, or I'd walked into some kind of weird prank. But no, she was deadly serious. My jaw dropped. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "This is my house. I bought it." She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Impossible. This property has been under the care of the Mountain Ridge Homeowners Association for years. Abandoned properties fall under our authority. I'm the HOA president, and I've been maintaining this place. You can't just walk in like you own it." That was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with an ordinary squatter, I was dealing with a full-blown HOA Karen, the kind of person who invents rules just to control others. She had moved furniture into the house, rugs on the floor, even her own photos hanging on the walls as if this had been her home all along. My shock quickly turned into anger. "Listen," I said firmly, pulling the deed from my bag. "I bought this house legally. Here's the paperwork. The county sold it to me. You don't own it, and this isn't part of any HOA. You need to leave, now." But instead of backing down, she smirked. "Paperwork means nothing up here. The HOA makes the rules, and we decided no outsiders are welcome. Since you left this place unattended again, I stepped in to care for it. If you want it back, you'll have to go through me." I couldn't believe her audacity. She was standing in my living room, surrounded by my walls, on my land, and trying to convince me I was the intruder. My pulse was racing. I'd heard of HOA nightmares before, but this was on another level. And that's how my battle with the mountain's self-proclaimed queen began, me, the rightful owner with the law on my side, versus a woman who believed her imaginary HOA crown gave her the power to take whatever she wanted. At that moment, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't just about kicking someone out of my house. It was about standing up against someone who thought rules only existed to serve her. And trust me, she wasn't going down without a fight. I stood there frozen, staring at this woman who had the nerve to stand in my house and talk to me like I was the intruder. She didn't look nervous or apologetic. No, she looked smug, like she had all the power and I was just some fool who stumbled into her kingdom. She walked toward me, every step sharp like she was stomping authority into the floor, and jabbed a finger toward my chest. "I told you," she barked, "this is HOA property. You don't get to decide what happens here. I'm Karen, president of the Mountain Ridge Homeowners Association, and that title means I'm in charge of every single cabin and acre on this ridge." I almost laughed out loud, but I held it in. Instead, I pulled the paperwork out again, clear as day, showing her the county seal, the signatures, the proof that I was the legal owner. "Look," I said, "this is my deed. I bought this place. You can't just waltz in and claim it's yours." She didn't even glance at the paper. She waved her hand like I was holding a grocery receipt. "That piece of paper means nothing here," she sneered. "This house sat empty for years. We kept an eye on it. We made sure no criminals or animals destroyed it. That makes it ours. You abandoned it again the moment you left, so I moved in. End of story." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Abandoned it again?" I repeated. "Lady, I was gone for 3 weeks to arrange contractors and materials. That's not abandonment, that's called preparing for renovations." She smirked and crossed her arms, rocking back and forth like she was enjoying herself. "Doesn't matter," she said. "The HOA voted, and we decided outsiders aren't welcome. I'm here now, and if you think you're going to move me out, you've got another thing coming. You want me gone? Then you'll have to pay every fine I've assigned to this property for violations, illegal abandonment, broken fencing, weeds taller than 6 inches, non-HOA approved exterior paint." She rattled off nonsense like she was reading from an invisible book of made-up laws. I was trying my best to stay calm, but inside, I was boiling. I had put my money, my time, and my dreams into this property, and here she was, trying to bully me out of it with rules she invented in her head. "Enough," I said, my voice louder this time. "You are trespassing. You have no legal claim. I'll give you one chance to pack your things and get out before I call the sheriff." That's when her mask cracked. She stepped closer, her face red, eyes glaring like daggers. "Don't you dare threaten me," she hissed. "You don't know who you're dealing with. I have connections in town, and one phone call from me can have you thrown off this mountain. You think the sheriff is going to believe some stranger waving a piece of paper over me, the HOA president they've known for years?" She was bluffing, but the confidence in her voice made me pause. What if she really did know people? What if her lies carried weight? Before I could even dial my phone, she pulled out hers and started calling someone. I couldn't hear who it was, but her voice was sharp and dramatic. "Yes, hello, there's a dangerous man who just broke into my home," she said, staring right into my eyes as she spoke. "He's threatening me, waving papers, yelling. Please send someone fast before he gets violent." My jaw dropped. She was twisting the whole thing, painting me as the criminal in my own house. I didn't waste a second. I pulled out my own phone and called the sheriff's office. My voice was steady, but I could feel my pulse racing. "This is the owner of the old mountain house on Ridge Road," I told them. "There's a woman trespassing inside, claiming it's hers. I have the deed with me. Please send a deputy." The dispatcher assured me someone was on their way. As soon as I hung up, she snapped her phone shut and smirked. "You're finished," she said. "They'll believe me. They always do. I'm the president, after all." She said that word, president, like it made her queen of the mountain, like the badge of her made-up title gave her power above the law. I walked through the house, and the more I saw, the angrier I became. She had dragged in couches, dressers, even put up lace curtains and family portraits. The fridge was full of groceries, her toiletries lined the bathroom counter, and piles of clothes were stacked in the bedroom. She had completely moved in, like she'd been there for months. It was surreal. This was supposed to be my renovation project, and here it looked like someone else's cozy home. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, shaking my head. She followed me around like a shadow, chirping her rules. No pets allowed in HOA homes. No outside lights after dark. No vehicles parked overnight unless registered. Renovations must be approved by the board. And since you're not even on the board, you're already in violation. I spun around, holding up the deed again, my patience gone. "You keep saying HOA this, HOA that. But this property isn't even listed as part of your neighborhood." I checked the maps before I bought it. The HOA boundary ends a mile down the ridge. This land isn't yours, never was, and never will be. She froze for a second, her eyes flickering with doubt, but then she recovered and doubled down. "Boundaries change," she snapped. "We voted last year to expand. Everything on this ridge falls under us now." I almost laughed at the absurdity. You can't just vote to expand onto land you don't own. That's not how the law works, I shot back. But she wasn't listening, people like her never do. Instead, she stood tall and crossed her arms, as if her stubbornness alone would bend reality. "Well, you'll never get rid of me," she said. "Even if the sheriff comes, I'll tell him I've been maintaining this house for years. They'll believe me over you. Everyone knows me. Nobody knows you." Her words were like poison, but I could see through her now. She wasn't confident, she was scared. She knew she was on thin ice, but she was betting that yelling louder and acting tougher would make me back down. Too bad for her, I wasn't about to fold. I stepped outside onto the porch, taking a deep breath of the cold mountain air, trying to clear my head. In the distance, I heard the faint rumble of a truck making its way up the gravel road. The sheriff was coming, and everything was about to be decided. Inside, Karen was still pacing, rehearsing her lies, probably practicing her tears for when the deputy arrived. My hands tightened around the deed. This wasn't just a piece of paper, it was my shield, my proof, my right. I wasn't going to let a power-hungry squatter steal my mountain dream. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to fight. Minutes later, the sound of crunching gravel echoed louder and louder until a county sheriff's truck appeared at the edge of the driveway. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was shaking my chest. This was it, the moment that would decide whether I got to keep my mountain home or lose it to a woman who thought she was queen of the ridge. Karen, on the other hand, looked like she'd just won the lottery. She straightened her sweater, smoothed her hair, and positioned herself right in front of the porch as if she were greeting old friends. Finally, she muttered with a smug smile, "They're here to deal with you." The deputy stepped out, a tall man with a calm but serious expression. He adjusted his belt, glanced at both of us, and asked the obvious question, "All right, what's going on here?" Before I could open my mouth, Karen sprinted forward, clutching her chest like she was about to faint. "Oh, officer, thank God you're here," she cried dramatically, pointing at me with shaking fingers. "That man broke into my home. He barged in, started yelling, waving papers at me, threatening me. I'm terrified for my safety. Please get him out before he hurts me." Her performance was Oscar-worthy, complete with trembling voice and fake tears. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed her myself. The deputy turned to me, studying me carefully, and asked, "Sir, do you have any proof of what you're saying?" That was my moment. I pulled the deed from my folder, handed it over, and explained everything clearly. "I bought this property from the county. Here's the signed deed with my name on it. I came back today to start renovations and found her living here without permission. She has no claim to this land." The deputy flipped through the paperwork, nodding slowly, his eyes narrowing as he read the official stamps and signatures. Karen saw the look on his face and immediately jumped in to interrupt. "Don't listen to him," she screeched. "He forged those papers. This house has been under HOA control for years. I've been maintaining it, paying dues, keeping it safe. That gives me ownership." The deputy raised an eyebrow. "Do you have any documents to prove that?" For the first time, Karen hesitated. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally muttered, "Well, no. But I'm the HOA president. Everyone in this county knows me. Ask anybody, they'll tell you this property has always been under our authority." The deputy sighed, clearly unimpressed. "Ma'am, being an HOA president doesn't mean you own properties that don't belong to you. This deed looks legitimate. Unless you can show me paperwork proving otherwise, you're trespassing." The smug smile that had been glued to her face all afternoon faltered, replaced by a twitch of panic. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. She jabbed her finger toward me again, raising her voice so it echoed across the trees. "Even if he owns it, he still has to follow HOA rules. He can't renovate without board approval, he can't bring guests, he can't light fires, he can't even park his truck overnight without registering. I'll fine him every day until he begs me to leave." The deputy looked like he was about to laugh, but he kept his professionalism. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "this property isn't on your HOA's map. You have no jurisdiction here. You can't enforce rules on land that doesn't belong to your association. And right now, your only concern should be removing yourself and your belongings immediately before I take further action." Karen's face turned bright red, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She knew she was losing control, and she hated it. "This is harassment," she shouted. "I have rights." The deputy didn't flinch. "You had the right to leave quietly when the rightful owner asked you to. Now you're risking criminal charges. Which option do you prefer?" For the first time since I walked through that door, I felt the weight lifting off my chest. Relief washed over me, but I stayed quiet, not wanting to poke the bear any further. Karen, however, wasn't ready to give up. She stormed back into the cabin, slamming the door behind her. Through the window, I could see her frantically grabbing boxes, clothes, and decorations, stuffing them into bags while muttering to herself. The deputy followed her inside to make sure she wasn't causing damage, and I stood on the porch, shaking my head in disbelief. How did a simple dream of renovating a mountain house turn into a showdown with a self-proclaimed HOA dictator? As she dragged her belongings out, she kept hurling insults at me. "You'll regret this. You city people think you can just waltz in and take over. You don't belong here. The HOA always wins, and when they hear about this, you'll be banned from the mountain for good." I didn't even bother responding. The deputy, though, finally lost his patience. "Ma'am," he said sharply, "one more word like that and I'll add disturbing the peace to your list of problems. Get your things and go." She glared at him, then at me, then back at the cabin as if she couldn't decide which she hated more. Finally, she huffed, stuffed the last box into her car, and slammed the trunk so hard the whole vehicle shook. Before she got in, she turned to me one last time, pointing at me with pure venom in her eyes. "This isn't over," she spat. "You might have won today, but the HOA never forgets. We'll find a way to make your life miserable." Then she peeled out of the driveway, dust and gravel flying, her car disappearing down the mountain road. For a long moment, silence settled over the cabin, broken only by the wind rustling through the trees. I felt like I could finally breathe again. The deputy walked back over, handed me my deed, and said, "You did the right thing calling us. Don't let people like that intimidate you. If she comes back, you call us right away." Folks like her think they're above the law, but they're not. I thanked him, shaking his hand, and watched as he drove off, leaving me alone at last with my cabin. I stepped back inside, surveying the mess Karen had left behind, nail holes in the walls from her pictures, scuff marks on the floor from her furniture, random trash scattered around. It wasn't how I wanted to start my renovation, but in a strange way, I felt stronger than before. This place wasn't just a project anymore. It was a symbol of standing my ground, of not letting anyone steal my dream no matter how loud they shouted or how many fake rules they waved around. That night, I set up a folding chair on the porch and watched the sun dip behind the mountains, painting the sky in gold and purple. For the first time since I bought the house, I felt like it truly belonged to me, not just on paper, but in my heart. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't finished. People like her don't just disappear. She might come back, or she might send her so-called HOA board to try again. But now I was ready. I had the deed, I had the law, and most importantly, I had no intention of backing down. This mountain house was mine, and no HOA Karen was ever going to change that. The deputy's taillights faded into the distance, leaving me standing on the gravel drive with nothing but the sound of wind whistling through the pine trees. For a long time I just stood there, letting it sink in. The house I had dreamed about, worked to buy, and planned to rebuild was finally mine in more than just name, it was mine in reality. But the scene that had just unfolded still replayed in my head, almost too bizarre to believe. I had walked into my own home and found someone else living inside, someone who believed she had the power to take it from me. The thought made my blood boil, but at the same time, I felt a deep sense of victory. For once, someone like Karen hadn't gotten her way. Still, I knew I couldn't let my guard down. People like her didn't just vanish after being told, no. She had looked me dead in the eye and promised I'd regret this, and I believed she meant it. I stepped back into the cabin and really looked at what she had done. It was eerie, almost unsettling. She had turned the space into her own little kingdom, moving in furniture that didn't belong, hanging up photos of her family, scattering rugs, curtains, and even her knickknacks. The fridge smelled of leftovers, the bathroom counter was littered with bottles of perfume, and the closet was stuffed with clothes that weren't mine. Every inch of the place bore her fingerprints. It felt less like she was squatting and more like she was trying to erase the fact that anyone else had ever lived there. As I walked through the rooms, I couldn't help but shake my head. It takes a special kind of arrogance to move into someone else's home and then pretend you're the rightful owner. I gathered what little trash she had left behind. Old receipts, a chipped mug, a broken lamp cord, and hauled it outside. The sooner her presence was gone, the better. By the time the sun had slipped behind the mountains, the cabin was quiet again. I sat on the porch with a flashlight, sipping from a thermos of coffee I had brought with me, and stared out at the valley below. For years, this house had been abandoned, and in that time, someone like Karen thought she could plant a flag and declare herself ruler. That told me something important. If I wanted to keep this place safe, I'd need to protect it. Squatters, nosy neighbors, or power-hungry HOA Karens, none of them were going to get a second chance. I pulled out my phone, made a few calls, and arranged for security cameras to be delivered first thing in the morning. I wasn't about to let her sneak back in while I was gone. The next day, as I started clearing out the junk and planning repairs, a few locals stopped by. Word travels fast in small mountain towns, and apparently, the showdown between me, Karen, and the sheriff had already made the rounds. An older man from down the road introduced himself and chuckled as soon as I mentioned her name. "Karen," he said with a grin. "Oh yeah, we all know her. She's been causing trouble for years. She runs that HOA like it's her personal army, bossing folks around, handing out fake fines, even trying to expand her territory onto land that doesn't belong to her. You're not the first she's messed with, but you might be the first who stood your ground." Hearing that made me feel better. It wasn't just me, she'd been doing this to people for ages, and nobody had stopped her. Until now. Over the next week, I threw myself into the work. I patched the roof, tore up the rotting boards on the porch, scrubbed the walls, and started hauling in materials for the renovation. Every nail I hammered, every board I replaced, felt like reclaiming the space all over again. But even as I worked, I couldn't shake the memory of her threats. At night, I'd catch myself listening for the crunch of tires on gravel or the slam of a car door outside. A couple of times, I swore I saw headlights on the ridge, just sitting there in the distance, watching. Maybe it was just paranoia, but deep down, I knew it was her. Karen wasn't the type to walk away quietly. One evening, I heard a knock on the door. My stomach flipped, half expecting her to be standing there again with her arms crossed and her voice dripping with demands. But when I opened it, it was the deputy from before. He gave me a reassuring nod and said he'd come to check in. "Thought I'd let you know," he said, "we've had a few more complaints from your friend Karen. She's been calling the office non-stop saying you're violating HOA rules, disturbing the peace, even endangering wildlife with your renovations. We know it's nonsense, but I figured you should be aware. My advice? Keep your deed handy and maybe consider filing a trespass notice with the county. That way, if she shows up again, it won't just be a warning, it'll be an arrest." His words were firm, and they reminded me that while I had won the battle, the war might not be over. I thanked him and promised I'd follow through. That night, I sat down with my papers, scanned copies, and sent everything to the county office. I wanted every record possible showing that the house was mine, legally and indisputably. If Karen tried to twist the story again, she'd be running into a wall of evidence. For good measure, I also changed the locks, added motion sensor lights, and set up the new security cameras. By the time I was done, the cabin wasn't just a house under renovation, it was a fortress. Weeks turned into months, and slowly the cabin transformed. The walls gleamed with fresh paint, the porch stood strong again, the roof no longer leaked. I added a wood-burning stove, new windows, and sturdy doors. Each project brought me closer to the vision I had when I first saw the listing. Every time I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I felt proud, not just of the work I was doing, but of the fact that I hadn't let someone bully me out of my dream. I'd heard too many stories of people caving under HOA pressure, paying fines they didn't owe, giving up land that was rightfully theirs. I refused to be one of them. The neighbors who stopped by often told me the same thing: "Karen won't forget this. But you did the right thing. You proved she's not untouchable." Their words stuck with me. Karen had built her whole reputation on fear, yelling, threatening, scaring people into compliance. And for once, someone had stood up to her and won. That didn't just protect me, it sent a message to everyone else she'd pushed around. Maybe, just maybe, she'd think twice before trying it again. Now, when I sit by the fire inside my fully restored mountain house, I think about that first day I walked in and found her standing in my living room, acting like a queen. I remember the panic, the anger, the absurdity of it all. And then I think about how far I've come since then. The house is no longer a battleground, it's my home, my sanctuary, my proof that sometimes the only way to deal with a bully is to stand tall and refuse to move. Karen may have promised revenge, but I'm not afraid. I have the law, the deed, and the will to fight for what's mine. And if she ever dares to return, she won't find an abandoned house waiting for her, she'll find me, ready, prepared, and stronger than ever. This mountain is my home now, and no HOA Karen will ever take that away.